Welcome to another video tutorial. In this video, we're going to take a look at how to set up a 2D game. Now, I'm not going to go into depth on how to actually make a 2D game. This literally is just going to cover how to get started, how to set up all the elements that are required for a 2D game. So we'll cover how to get the camera set up for a 2D game. We'll talk about things to know about the tiles when it comes to making a 2D game. We'll talk about how to set up the character, the player character, and other characters to support 2D games. And then we'll talk a little bit about layers, the Z height layering system when it comes to 2D games. So to do this, we'll create a whole new project and we'll create it from scratch. So we'll do a bare bones project and we'll call this 2D demo. So, okay. So we now have our project. It's got a single tile and a single character, which we're not actually going to use. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a map first of all, which we'll just call map 1. And what we'll do is we'll just quickly put this grass tile down just so we've got something to reference. So in order to make a 2D game, the first thing you want to do is go to Game Configuration and go to the Gameplay section. And to the Camera Type section, you want to find where it says Projection. You want to change this from Perspective to Orthogonal. So click that. And then you're going to want to change the default pitch from 55 to 90 degrees and click OK. If you want to mess around with the zoom, you can as well do that. So when designing a 2D game in the map editor, ideally you want to click the top down button because this will give you this is what it's going to look like in game. So essentially, the options we've just done here in the game configuration, the orthogonal and the 90 degrees, this is what it's going to look like in game. It's going to put the camera looking directly down at your map. So now we've got the camera set up for creating a 2D game in the map editor. So from the top-down perspective, let me quickly explain what the controls are. So the mouse wheel is used to zoom in and zoom out. And if you want to pan the camera around, hold down the Shift key and the middle mouse button, and then just move your mouse to pan around the scene. Okay? So that's the first part, is setting up the camera so it looks straight down at the top of the tiles. Because essentially that's how it creates the illusion of a 2D game. Is essentially you're just looking down at the top of everything. Okay? Whereas 3D, you can pitch the whole thing. You can look at it from any angle. Whereas top down is orthogonal, is literally just straight down looking at the top. Okay? So let's also quickly talk about how to import images into your models. So you might have a sprite sheet, for example. You might have certain textures you want to use. So rather than this grass texture, I'm going to use a custom stone texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the Add a New Resource button, change this to Tile, and I'm going to make it 16 by 16, and I'm going to call it Stone. And I'm going to make it passable. And then what I'm going to do is angle the camera using the right click so that I'm looking down from the top. You could also just select top and center it like that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click this button here that says Import from External Format. So click that, and then you're going to browse to your external PNG that you want to import. Now, the important thing to know about importing importing an image into the voxel editor. The images need to be the same size as your tile, character, object, whatever it is you're setting up. So because the grid dimensions of this tile are 16 by 16, my image, my PNG, should also be 16 by 16 pixels. So if you've got a large image, then you need to take it into an image editing software like Photoshop or GIMP or something like that, and you need to resize it to 16 by 16 pixels. It's going to be very, very, very small, but you've got to understand that in RPG in a Box, every pixel is a voxel. That's how it translates. So our 16 by 16 pixel image is going to become a 16 by 16 voxel model. So if I select my stone tile PNG and then click OK, that will now bring in this texture, and I'll save the tile. And if we preview it, that's just sort of in essence what it looks like. Not particularly great, but it serves the purpose of being a custom stone texture. Okay. So if we go back to the map editor now, we can place our stone texture in our map and have something like that. Okay. Let's also import a texture from the asset library. If I type Kenny into the search filter thing, we can use the assets from the Kenny project, which is an example 2D game that comes with RPG in a Box. So if we select, for example, this wall here and possibly this tile here, and we'll import those. If we take a look at these in the voxel editor, you can see that these again are from the top down. This is where it looks like a floor tile, right? But if you actually preview it, it's a stone, what's supposed to be a stone wall, okay? Remember, everything in a 2D game is built from the perspective of the camera being face down, i.e. looking down directly from the top. So this wall, we can put this across here, maybe put a bit of variety in like that. Oops. And this would be the equivalent of a wall around our room, okay? And notice how these tiles are set to not passable. So even though they're actually, from a 3D point of view, they're actually flat tiles, so you should really be able to walk on them, by setting them to not be passable means that when they're placed in a 2D top-down environment, they act like walls because they automatically don't have any navigation. So you'll see these lines are missing, okay? This would break the illusion because now the character would be able to walk onto those tiles as if they're floor tiles. But by not having those, then these can act like wall tiles, and you'll see in a minute when we play the game that the character will only be able to go as far as here, and that will act like the wall. Obviously, if you wanted to put a grass tile or a stone tile, let's say here, then this could be like a doorway. So we could put a path leading out like that. So if we zoomed out a bit, we could have a little corridor, something like that, right? So just to embellish things a bit, let's also make this kind of like that. Okay, so that's essentially the map to a degree set up. But what we could do as well is we could select this tile and we could up the Z depth. In other words, we could click this arrow a couple of times, let's say to 3, and then we could click there. So if we were to look at this map from a 3D point of view, you can see that this tile that we've just placed is actually floating. You can see it's actually floating above the ground a little bit. But when you're looking at it from a top-down perspective, it just looks like any other wall piece, right? Now this is, not a particularly great example for using it. In this case, you might use a different texture, or a different looking tile, but just to demonstrate how this would work. So that's the map set up for a little bit. Let's now talk about characters, because this is the most sort of important part of a 2D game and the part where a lot of people get stuck when it comes to setting up 2D games. So to do this, I'm going to import a pixel art character I downloaded off the internet, just so you can see how you might also use a sprite sheet. So I'm going to click the new resource button. This is going to be a character, and we're going to make this 32 by 32, and we'll call the character, I don't know, Jake, let's say. Okay, click OK, and you'll be met with this screen. Same thing again, we want to look top down. Everything in 2D games is top down. And then we're going to click the import from external format button again, browse. And then same thing again, your 2D character doesn't have to be 16 by 16, but it can't be any larger than 32 in any of the directions. So when we talk about size of images, we're obviously talking about pixels rather than voxels. So for example, this character I'm about to import is 24 by 32. So it's the maximum height, but it's a little bit slimmer than 32. So if I bring this in, this is the image. Okay, well, this is actually a PNG being brought in as an image and then being converted into a model. You can see it's actually 3D, but because we're importing it, it just brings it in as a sort of flat image. And then what you would then do in this case is I would then go around and delete all of the green voxels and carve out the player character. So I'm going to do that quickly and edit out all of this, because it's obviously going to take me a little while. So we'll come back when this is a carved out image. Here we have the image as I've carved it out by deleting all of the green background. I'm going to select everything and just position it a little bit more towards the center, like maybe that. Bring it down a bit so it's touching the actual bottom of the top grid. Okay, and save that. So that's our first sprite, if you will. Now obviously if you've got a sprite sheet, I don't immediately remember off the top of my head how you do sprite sheets. There is a video I will put in the description of this video if you wish to watch that. It's one of the one of Sarah's tutorials where she actually covers sprite sheets. But obviously another way you could do it is if you had individual images of your sprite, you could bring them in as individual separate PNGs. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit. Now I've got access to the voxels, because now effectively this has become a voxel model now. I'm just going to make changes to this for the different animations. But nonetheless, we've imported this image and we've cut away all of the extraneous stuff we don't want. We've saved it. So now if we quickly add the animations you'd need for a model, a player character. So we need idle and we need walk. We just add those in quickly. So let's save. We also need to go to the model properties, scroll down and find where it says 2-dimensional and click that on. Okay. Then what we'll quickly do is save the model, go to our map, select a tile, let's say in the center, right click, copy the coordinate, and we'll create a quick, we've got one. Open our startup script and map 1, paste the coordinates and save, and let's test our game. One thing I did forget to do is go to game configuration, general, player character, Jake. Make sure you're playing as your 2D character. So here we are in the game and I can move around, but we've got a bit of an issue. The character is spinning in unwanted directions. So we also need to fix that. And that's because a 2D game requires a few more animation names than the ones we've just given it, okay? But we can see that we can't go any further than these walls. If I walk down, I can't go any further. Now, obviously, we have a bit of an issue in the sense that the feet are clipping into the bottom tile a bit. So you'd have to refine your tiles and things a bit more. But let's fix this issue, which is the rotating player. So going back into the voxel editor with our player character, we need to create a walk north. We need to create a walk east. We need to create a walk south. And we need to create a walk west. So that should give us all 4 compass directions: east, north, south, west. And if you don't specify one, so if you didn't create a walk north, for example, then it will always fall back to the standard one. So if you wanted walk north to just be the same as walk, then you could potentially just not have it. It would, whenever you walk in a direction that's not been specified, it will just use the standard walk defined frames, okay? But if we now save the model and play it again, you'll see that the character should now not rotate. So if we now move to the side and up and down, this is now starting to behave a lot more like what we want. Now, obviously, the character now is a bit static. So what we could do, just to polish this up a bit more, is we'll duplicate this frame. So we've got a frame 2. We'll select the whole model. We'll click this flip horizontal button, and that can be when the character is going that direction. Deselect. And then we will go back to frame 1. We'll duplicate again, move that to frame 3. You can move that to frame 3, and then we'll amend this to make it look like he's going away from the camera. So to do that, I'll just quickly cut away the cap, part of his hat. You can obviously spend a lot more time with your models and things. This is just to show you really just the concepts of a 2D game. So we'll colour in his eyes, because obviously he should be facing the other way. We will colour in the lettering on the hat. We will pick the colour of the hair and draw some hair from the back of the head. Maybe add some and that just to make it look like he's turned away. Obviously the front of his shirt should look a bit different. Again, you could go to a lot more detail than this. This is just to give you concepts. Okay, and we'll use that as his facing away frame. Okay, so then what we need to do once we've done that, save the model, saving the new frames, go to the model properties, scroll down to where it says animations, and we want to find walk west and set that 2 to 2, and then walk north 3 to 3. And if we save that and play, now if we walk this way, nothing happens, but if you walk that way, he's now facing the mirror to that direction. If we go up, he then faces away. Now notice how when I let go, he automatically faces the opposite direction. Likewise, if I go up but then let go, he automatically turns 180 to face us again. That's because we need to do the same thing with the idle animations. So he's only got one idle animation at the moment. So if we wanted, for example, him to always face the direction we're going in, then if we create a idle north, which is frame 3 to 3, then when we play the game, when we go north and let go, he stays facing north. And if we go towards the south, he will default to his idle animation in this case, which is facing this way. So if we want him to stay facing west, for example, when we go west, we'd need an idle west with the same frames, in this case 2, so he stays going in that direction. Does that make sense? So now that we've got the player set up with the correct animations and walking frames and things, let's take a look at the issue we have with the scaling. So the issue we have is that this character that we made is 32 by 32 voxels, whereas our map is 16 by 16. So what that means is that obviously our player character is much larger than the world around them. And this can present itself in some of the issues you've seen, where when we're walking down here, the character is overlapping the wall. So we need to address that. So 2 things you might want to consider. When you're making 2D games, what you probably want to do is actually keep everything the same size. So if you're going to make a 32 by 32 character, then ideally make a map that's 32 by 32 grid. Then everything kind of stays the same size and it just makes things a lot easier. Likewise, if you're going to make a 16 by 16 map, then make your player character a 16 by 16 player character. Generally, on the whole, 2D games, you would have kind of small characters anyway. They don't need to be as big as the 3D games. But that's entirely up to you to make the decision about the visuals of your game. But it's just worth pointing out that you might find things a lot easier if you just made the player characters or all the characters the same size as your tiles. But again, that's entirely up to the discretion of the individual designer. But in this case, let's talk about where we've got a map that's 16 by 16, but we've got a player character, or any character to be more precise, that is of a 32 by 32 scale. How can we sort of correct the issue we have here where it's just overlapping the wall and things like that and not fitting on this grid properly? See how it's sort of a bit offset, right? If we were to go down to this last walkable tile here, the character is predominantly off of that tile and mainly on the tile below, which is why it looks like they are stepping on the wall. So in order to sort of help rectify that, we're going to do a couple of things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the model, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to reposition the character. Now obviously we've done a whole load of animation frames on this character, so we're going to have to do this for all of the frames. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole of the character, and I'm going to go up by 3, let's say. So I'll do the same on frame 2. So 1, 2, 3, and the same with frame 3. 1, 2, 3. So because we've got to do this for all the frames, it's probably a good idea to make sure with your first frame, before you make any more, make sure your character is scaled and positioned as it should be before you proceed to make all the other frames. As we've only made a couple, we can sort of address this here and now. So we've made that change. That's the first thing, but that's not the only thing that we can do. If we save the model, and we go to the map, and we select our character, we can now see that it's a bit better. The position now where the player is going to be positioned on the last green walkable tile, the connecting dot is now on his nose rather than on the rim of his hat. But it's still not good enough, and there's not much more room we have left in the model to be able to move it. We could move it up a bit more. For example, let's do that with the first frame, but we'll put it back in a second. but that's now moved it all the way to the top. But even that's not going to be enough, because if we go back to the map editor and select the character, it's just about enough. You can see that most of his body is in the right tile, but his feet are still overlapping onto the wall. So, and now we've now got the issue where his hat and the top of his head is going onto the wall above here. But that kind of works in that sense, because it looks like the wall's behind him, which is fine. But certainly here, we've definitely still got the issue of the feet should not be on the bottom wall, because it breaks the illusion of that being a wall. So what we can do instead, let's undo the movement of this particular tile so that it all matches up. What we can do instead is go into the model properties for our player character or any of your characters, and you want to scroll down till you find an option that says size in tiles. And this basically tells the voxel editor how many tiles does this model is it supposed to take up. In this case, it's set to 1 to 1. In other words, it's sort of saying to the engine that this model should take up 1 tile. Well, because this model is bigger than 1 tile, that's why we're getting this issue. So instead, what we can do is we can drop this down and change this to 2 by 2. And that tells the engine that this model should effectively take up 2 tiles. And because the grid is 16 by 16 and the model is 32 by 32, which means it's 2 times bigger than the size of a map tile, this will then automatically accommodate for that difference. So if we save the model now, having changed this to 2 by 2 and positioned the model more in the center, if we go back to the map editor now, we can see that his feet no longer touch the bottom wall. Let's play this in game so you can actually see the actual effect. So here we are in game. If we go down, and there we go. I can't go any further down. We're now on the bottom tile and we're not overlapping onto the wall. If we go up, that's as far as we can go up in that way. So you might want to mess around with the positioning a bit so that you get a bit of his head going over the top wall. So for that, what we might do is go back into the editor and move him back down again. Oops. Maybe just a little. Same with that one. So it's just a case of just fine-tuning both the position of the model in the voxel editor, but also enabling the 2 by 2 if you wish to use a bigger model than your map. Ideally, though, I would say, just to relieve all of this headache, is just make your characters the same size as your tiles, because then you don't have to worry about most of this work. But let's give this a go and just see what this looks like. So there we go. His feet are still not touching the bottom wall. If we go up a bit, then that's as far as we can go. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. At least we're not overlapping the bottom wall. So the next thing to talk about is the layering. So we have a gap here now it's not wide enough for the player, because the player's now a 2 by 2 and it's just not going to fit into that gap at all, no matter how much I try and move into that gap. So let's go back into the map editor and let's just quickly amend this map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the tiles. I'm going to select the stone tile. I'm going to make this a bit wider and paint the nav mesh in. And then to demonstrate the Z height, or the layering system, what we can do is we can select one of these tiles, let's say this one here. And then what we can do is we can up the grid height to 3, and then we can place these down. So that, again, they'll be floating in 3D space. But as I say, when you look from a top-down perspective, they just look like the rest of the wall. Another example of this we could do is off camera, I've created a bush tile. So again, it's just a top-down tile cut around a pixel art bush, and we can use that as well. Same concept, we'll increase the height to 3, and then we can put one of those there, maybe another one there. Okay, so if we save the map, so now because the bush tiles and these 2 tiles here are at a higher Z height than the rest of the wall and floor and our character, it means that when our character walks through that space, they go behind. So this is a way to have a character, for example, hide in a bush, or if there's a doorway, they can go underneath through the doorway. So if that was, an archway or something, they're now going under or through the arch. Lots of different things you can do, and obviously Z height allows you to have things on top of one another. This is just to get you set up so you understand the concepts of how to make a 2D game. From here, you can then refine how your game should look and play. Last thing to quickly check is let's load the game configuration, and I can't remember which direction it is. Let's try 40 and see if that zooms out rather than in. Okay, that zooms in. Wasn't sure. So if we make this a bigger number, so 120, let's say, then that gives you the ability to, have more of your game on screen at once. So the only other thing I haven't mentioned, which I'm not going to show in this video, but I'll mention it, is the same principle applies for attack. So if you, for your attack animations, you need an attack north, an attack south, an attack west, and an attack east. And you do it exactly the same as we did with the idle and the walk, okay? And your characters, your NPCs and your enemies, you'll set up exactly the same as a player character. It needs to be top down. So the character, in essence, in the voxel editor needs to look like they're lying down, essentially, because the camera is going to be looking down on them. Let's load in one of the Kenny NPCs, like this one, for example. If we import this, again, you'll see that is all done from the top down. Okay? Other than that, everything else should work in terms of RPG in a Box. Attach points and things should still work as they do. This is just to explain how to get set up with the concepts of a 2D game. So I hope that this has helped, and I hope that this has got you set up with creating a 2D game. So with that said, that'll wrap up this video. Thanks for watching.